This is Ambazonia Calling. News, analysis, commentary, opinion, editorials. Ambazonia Calling is a co-production of the Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. Welcome. My name is Ntumfoyn Herbert, and I bring revolutionary greetings from our studios in Washington, D.C. to all of you, friends of Ambazonia and fellow Ambazonians on Ground Zero and across the globe. The All Ambazonia Consultative Council is being convened for mid-August in the United States. The Ambazonia First Consultative Council is being convened in Canada in mid-August. And since there cannot be two without three, some genius has decided that a third All-Anglophone conference needs to be held in Buea by the end of August 2018. If you are confused, you are not alone. If you are asking what exactly is going on, you are not alone either. Elsewhere in the news this week, political dinosaur Paul Biya is still running for the top job in neighboring colonial Cameroon and still sponsored and funded by France. Biya's colonial army continues its rape of Ambazonia this week, including crossing the border into Ikom in neighboring Nigeria and visiting more of its genocidal violence on 8 members of the same household of Ambazonian refugees, executed and their mortal remains thrown in their rooms and found Saturday morning. Here with the first part of this week's wrap-up of the news is Ambazonia Calling's Innocent Chair.
Reactions have been swift and uniform in condemning what conveners call the Anglophone General Conference. Organizers Wednesday said the conference is to discuss the current crisis in Ambazonia and agree on delegates that will represent the people at a yet-to-be-convened national dialogue that they are begging Cameroon's Biya to consider organizing someday. Purportedly convened by His Eminence Christian Cardinal Tumi, the 4 clergymen, including the synod clerk of the Presbyterian Church and 2 imams from Buea and Bamenda, handpicked pro-federalist Dr. Simon Munzu as spokesman and initiative advisor. A pick that certainly biases the final outcome of such a meeting and explains why pro-restoration voices have called the August 28th and 29th meeting dead on arrival. In the meantime, the former president of Ghana, Jerry Rawlings, has called out African and world leaders, particularly the UN, France, and England, as greedy and condemned them for turning a blind eye to the atrocities unfolding in Cameroon. Known for his pragmatism and policies that eventually ushered a turnaround for Ghana in the 80s, the outing is a booster to Ambazonian restorationists who have been longing for international support. Fongorji Dinka of the ROA is known to have visited President Rawlings in 2017 to plead for his support and that of Ghana. Also worthy of note, the former Somaliland ambassador to Ethiopia, in a video gone viral Wednesday, has made a similar plea. Mahmoud Adam Jamal said the world can ill afford to witness the unfolding of another genocide similar to Rwanda or Sudan. La République du Cameroon has deployed gunships in bombing the lone clinic in the village of Mouk-Fozimondi in Lobielem County. Fresh pictures of the skeleton that is left of the clinic Wednesday, July 25th, show caved-in roofs, billows of smoke and broken walls of the lone clinic within a 30-mile radius. Civilian casualties have not been reported at this time, but clearly the goal is to deprive Amba restoration fighters of any medical help. Prior to the bombings, La République du Cameroon cut off power and internet supply to the area last week. I am Innocent Chair and will be back for more news of the week.
There's plenty of shows still to come, so please stay tuned. Kick back, relax, enjoy Ambazonia Calling. Ambazonia Calling can now confirm that some of the hostages reportedly taken by Ambazonian fighters may be in fact abductees held by pro-Biya militia. At least 2 of the 7 chiefs of the Southern Zone, allegedly held, have been vocal activists and supporters of Ambazonia's independence restoration quest. It would seem that the Biya regime is taking hostages and blaming pro-independence fighters for the crime. Let me bring back Innocent Chair with more news wrap-up, including advice and warnings to Ambazonians of the growing presence of spies posted to Ambazonia by the colonial regime.
The abducted village chief of Lisoka, Moliwe, Chief Banda, has died. He died yesterday of unknown causes. Heavy rainfall precipitated a landslide Tuesday in Limbe, southern zone of Ambazonia. 15 people are estimated missing, most likely dead, but it is yet too early to determine a final count. Calls for stranger danger are on the rise across Ambazonia. The audios on social media all want to be vigilant who you rent your house to, where and with who you share a drink, and to shut your mouth, especially in taxis and other forms of public transportation. La République du Cameroon agents are everywhere. Reactions continue pouring in with regards to the video showing La République du Cameroon soldiers shooting to death women and their small children. Speaking from Johannesburg Wednesday, the United Nations Human Rights Chief said he was utterly appalled by the video, stating, quote, "I am deeply worried that these killings captured on camera may not be isolated cases," end quote. The government prosecutor for the court in Fundong-Boyo County in Ambazonia has been abducted by unknown forces. Justice Francis Tanyi was heading to Bamenda Thursday from Com. Still in Fundong, a government of La République informant was killed for misleading a pack of Amber boys, the Com Pythons, into waiting arms of La République du Cameroun soldiers. On Thursday, there was another killing of a young man in Muyuka by La République du Cameroun soldiers because he was wearing a blue and white t-shirt that looks like the flag of Ambazonia. Finally, Dr. Samuel Sako of the IG Group invited frontline leaders via an invitation that hit social media before many of the leaders ever received it. According to the calendar, the meeting should coincide with the rejected initiative of His Eminence, Christian Cardinal Tumi, at the end of August. I am Innocent Chair for Ambazonia Calling.
As you heard in the news wrap-up, those convening the 3rd Anglophone Conference have been roundly denounced, including from out of Condemning maximum security prison. From one of its cells, political prisoner, an Ambazonian hero, Tse Conrad, sent a message out this week titled, "Tell Them." Tell the Munzus and the Tumis that we are angry. We are angry because if their bullets miss us, their pennies will not miss our sisters or our wives. We are angry because in the early 19th century, there was a brotherhood and then a slavehood. We are angry because during the 1961 unification, we brought love while they brought hate and deceit. We are angry because after 1961 unification, there was a federation that disappeared for lies. We are angry because after the 1972 fake referendum, Ahijos seized our southern Cameroon's identity from us. We are angry because after the fake union with them, we lost all our economic and political prowess. We are happy at least for once, because in 1984, Paul Biya seceded from the fake union with a decree. Then we went back to being angry, because by 1993, our brothers and sisters were beaten for the GCE board. Tell the Munzus and the Tumis that we are angry. We are angry because in the early 1990s, our brothers and sisters died for multipartism. We are angry because in 2005 at the University of Boya, our brothers and sisters were killed for protesting exam fraud. We are angry because in 2016 across southern Cameroons, our brothers and sisters were killed during peaceful protests. Now if Munzu and the Tumis are not angry, let them know we are angry, because from 1963, Ahijo and Paul Biya have been arresting, torturing, killing, imprisoning thousands of southern Cameroonians. We are angry because from the beginning of the fake union, we have been marginalized, annexed, and assimilated. Let the Munzus and the Tumis know, if they don't know yet, We are angry because we have been insulted and provoked, cheated, stigmatized, and pushed to the edge as a people. Yes, we are angry because we are referred to as Biafrans, rats, dogs, enemies in the house, les Bamenda, les Ambazozo. We are angry because we have been raped, killed at close range, maimed and jailed just for being Anglophones in this fake union. Tell the Munzus and the Tumis that we are furious. I stop here for Comrade Say Conrad, who is serving time for being a true Ambazonian hero. Still ahead in this edition, we have The Devil Unmasked with Professor Emmanuel Tatamenta. We have a winner of the Fucka of the Week. And we are not done until you have heard our letter to Joshua. So stay tuned, kick back, relax, and enjoy Ambazonia Calling. Dennis Atemken shared his indignation at the conference as well. Here are excerpts from his message to Christian Cardinal Tumi and to Dr. Simon Munzo, delivered in studio by our own Manjong Jutambe.
The conveners are definitely acting on instructions from and on behalf of Yaoundé. It would be a surprise if they are not on the payroll of the colonizer. Otherwise, how come they easily obtain permission to meet in wartime when every other meeting is being monitored and broken up? To deceive Ambazonians, these apostles of the devil at the Tudi want to be described as God's children, begging the question, which God do they say they worship again? Is it the same God of justice or the God of political illusions? There cannot be peace without justice, and there can be no justice unless La Republic ends its 57-year illegal occupation of southern Cameroons. And justice will be achieved when the people of Ambazonia enjoy international sovereignty, sing their own anthem, fly their own flag, live under their own laws, govern themselves, free of recolonization, illegal occupation, colonial domination, and subjugation by their neighbors. The conveners speak the language of traitors. They mistake Ambazonians for Anglophones. They are still stuck in the 1990s when Ambazonians were still pleading for national dialogue. It takes Judas Iscariot, blinded by 13 pieces of silver, to be granted the right to convene a conference in the heart of a campaign of death. Fear, intimidation, war, and numbing brutality. The conveners can fool only themselves by pretending that the colonizer have suddenly become interested in dialogue. If the colonizer wanted to dialogue on the crisis, why have they prevented both the Senate and so-called Parliament from debating it? Why have they rejected mediation offers from the United States, the European Union, the United Nations, the African Union, and the Commonwealth, among others? If the colonizers were finally interested in dialogue, why don't they start by complying with the ruling of the African People's Court in Banjul, calling for dialogue? The long and short is that this conference is Munzu's work, acting in his capacity as an agent of the CPDM. The goals of the meeting are consistent with everything Munzu has previously said he was pursuing, which is conspire towards the annihilation of the people of Ambazonia. It is clear that Munzu does not seek a solution to the crisis, except a solution that satisfies his personal ambition to become prime minister or fatten his next paycheck with the United Nations. No one, not even Cardinal Tumi, can reasonably expect participants to express themselves freely at a conference held in the midst of fear, intimidation, and war. As a result, we call on all Ambazonians to wholeheartedly reject and stay away from this conference, for they can only attend at their own risk. Spies of the colonialists will track down and kill anyone who genuinely advocates Ambazonia. Biya will authorize Munzu and company to pretend to advocate Ambazonia in order to give the impression that no subject is taboo. They will fool the international community, but not Ambazonians. Munzu is even wishing that the diaspora attends what can only be Nera Hotel 2. Munzu and company are genuinely interested in lasting peace. They would advocate, if Munzu and company are genuinely interested in lasting peace, they would advocate independence for Ambazonia. The conveners, beginning with Munzu and Cardinal Tumi, and even Dictator Biya, know that Ambazonians will settle for nothing less. Manjong Jut Ambe for Denis Atemkem, reporting for Ambazonia Calling.
Colonial Cameroon is still getting ready for what Mr. Biya calls elections. One thing is clear. Colonial Cameroon is not getting any help from the world, and I mean from the civilized world, in support of the upcoming round of electoral fraud bill to ensure that Mr. Biya remains president for life. Ambazonia Calling's Willibrod Ade offers advice on exactly what Ambazonians must do come October 7 to show to any doubting Thomases the world over that our people intend to defend and jealously protect their independence.
When on June 27, the U.S. Subcommittee on Africa held a hearing on the crisis in the Republic of Cameroon, many Ambazonians were understandably giddy at the prospect that finally the U.S. was going to take more interest in what has been happening in that part of the world for close to 2 years. In the ambient euphoria that followed, most people probably missed an important piece of information that came out of that hearing, and that is that the U.S. has no plans to give electoral support to the Biya regime to organize the October 7 presidential election. This revelation was made by Ambassador Donald Yamamoto, the Acting Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, in response to a question by Representative Karen Bass of California. And in what could be interpreted as the reason for this decision, he went on to state, quote, "The commitment to electoral reform is not there," end of quote. A month and a half earlier, on May 7th, the European Union representative to Cameroon, Hans-Peter Schadek, declared that the EU will not be sending an observation mission to cover the presidential election in October because they have not yet received an invitation. What could account for these decisions when we know that up till now, these same countries have always validated Biya's electoral shenanigans through questionable election monitoring schemes? Could it be that some of the issues that were raised by the consortium of civil society organizations in 2016, which have since evolved to a recognition quest for Ambazonia, are beginning to find resonance in the decision-making centers of the West? Can it be that the pressure that's been mounted by Ambazonians the world over has started bearing fruit? Whatever the explanation, it is obvious that the world is beginning to take notice that there is a serious crisis brewing in Cameroon. While Ambazonians may feel that our plight has not yet caught the attention of the powers that be, or that they are turning a blind eye to the atrocity crimes perpetrated by Cameroonese soldiers in furtherance of Cameroon's colonization of our people, it bears reminding that the international community is notoriously slow to act on anything, even when the lights are all blinking red. Viewed from this angle, Ambazonians can take comfort in the fact that the world is beginning to pay attention, albeit slowly, to what is going on in Cameroon. The upcoming presidential election presents a unique opportunity for Ambazonians to make a definitive statement to the world by ensuring that there is no election in our territory on October 7. Such a move will in no uncertain terms tell the world that we are not Cameroonese, but proud Ambazonians determined to protect and defend our independence. Willibrod Ade for Ambazonia Calling.
This is Ambazonia. One nation, one soul, one people. Sacrificing, bleeding, and yes, dying if need be, until we kick the colonialists out and enthrone a government of the people in Boya. Lilian Ayuk Tabe, the spouse of Siseko Ayuk Tabe, sent mail this week to the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, basically reminding him of his commitment to the people of the United Nations and seeking his intervention in the unconditional release of her husband and other Ambazonian political prisoners. Here is Ambazonia Calling's Chrissa Cunningham with the full text of that letter.
Dear Mr. Secretary General, from the opening moments of your tenure, you were determined to make the promotion of human dignity the core of your work, and pledged to help alleviate the sufferings of the most vulnerable people on earth, especially those forcibly displaced from their homes and communities. At your direction, the UN has adopted a new approach that recognizes the institution's past failures and calls for a victim-centered strategy rooted in transparency, accountability, and justice. You have spoken movingly of the plight of the victims and described how their accounts will haunt you forever. On the 26th of June 2018, marking the International Day in support of victims of torture, you stated that torture in any form is absolutely unacceptable and can never be justified in all circumstances, including periods of emergencies, political unrest, and even war. This is inspiring and comforting, and gives me and the families of victims worldwide some hope. However, my husband, Mr. Julius Ayuk Tabe, leader of the people of the Southern Cameroons, and scores of other prominent Southern Cameroonian exiles living in Nigeria who were abducted in Abuja on the 5th of January 2018, unlawfully deported to Cameroon and detained incommunicado for 6 months, are still languishing in illegal detention in Yaoundé. Prior to their abductions, many of them were working in Nigeria as university professors, engineers, businessmen, and legal practitioners. Others were refugees who recently fled Cameroon government-sponsored violence and incipient genocide in the southern Cameroons. These abductions and extraditions were in flagrant violation of the United Nations Declarations of Human Rights, and an apparent continued silence of the United Nations on this issue calls into question the seriousness with which the United Nations takes its commitment to protect the fundamental rights of peoples everywhere. Mr. Secretary General, I plead with you to use your good offices to compel the government of Cameroon to release my husband and all other Southern Cameroonians being held illegally in detention centers in Cameroon, and for that government to end the genocide it is carrying out in the Southern Cameroons. My husband and fellow detained Southern Cameroonian leaders have suffered untold hardship, torture, cruelty, and inhumane and degrading treatment in detention. Mr. Secretary General, at the time of writing this appeal, the government of Cameroon announced that it had commenced the process of final interrogation of these detainees, after which they will be arraigned before the military tribunal in Yaoundé. If your office continues to be silent, the outcome of the trial by the military tribunal in Cameroon is predicted to parallel the unlawful hanging of Ken Saro-Wiwa and his 9 Ogoni compatriots in Nigeria in 1995, after a similar trial by that nation's military tribunal. The inaction of the United Nations to compel the government of Cameroon to respect its commitments under relevant international agreements and conventions it has ratified will send the wrong message to nations of the world that fundamental international regulatory instruments can be violated and eroded with impunity and without penalty. The weeks of street protests around the globe, including in front of the UN headquarters in New York, led by the peace-loving people of the Southern Cameroons, which greeted the sad news of my husband's illegal abduction and detention in Nigeria, bear testament to the weight of the responsibility Mr. Ayuk Tabe bears as leader of the people of Southern Cameroons. My husband and his lieutenants in the Southern Cameroons Revolution are freedom fighters and men of peace who are seeking to free our people from the determined clutches of the villainous, vampiric political mess that is Cameroon. My husband and his colleagues are striving to restore dignity to the people of the Southern Cameroons by restoring their fundamental rights and freedoms as human beings. I thank you for your time and hopefully look forward to your response. Sincerely, Mrs. Lillian Ayuk Tabe.
Stay tuned. Ambazonia Calling will be right back with more news, analysis, commentary, opinion, and editorials. Observers and the civilized world was startled this week by La République du Cameroon's move to publicize rather than protect the 17-year-old breastfeeding teenage mother who was raped by an on-duty paramilitary officer in Bamenda. As in apartheid days in South Africa, the crime for which the teenager was figuratively pulled over by the rapist was the fact that she did not carry a colonial pass called the National Identity Card. The gaffe was committed by Joseph Betty Asumo, Cameroon's minister delegate at the presidency in charge of defense, as Ambazonia Calling's Innocent Chair now reports.
It sounds almost too sad to be admissible in hell. Rape in broad daylight at the veterinary junction in Bamenda by a gendarme of La République du Cameroon on duty. That is a major setback, especially for a government that has been telling the world that its military is as professional as they come, even when there has been irrefutable evidence of the army burning down villages, shooting on armed citizens, and committing other serious crimes against humanity. Last Monday, July 23rd, a hapless petite 17-year-old was heading to her mother's provision store to grab something and run back home in respect of ghost towns. A paramilitary officer of La République du Cameroon not only made sure she never made it to her destination at her mother's store, he rerouted her into a gas station, literally held a gun to her head and undressed her, and then forced himself onto her and into her. He raped her. The victim cries the tears of hundreds, if not thousands, of Ambazonian girls, students, women and children that soldiers of La République du Cameroon have been raping as a weapon of war since the onset of the Ambazonia restoration struggle. Honorable Herbert stood in front of his dishonorable colleagues at the hand-clapping parliament in Yaoundé and told the world of the rape of his niece at the University of Buea. No one listened. There was not enough horror when 2 armed soldiers stormed into a hostel with 3 female occupants at the same university in Buea in 2017. They force-filmed them naked and crying for mercy. Is it rocket science to figure out what happened when the cameras were turned off? What about the truck full of university girls that disappeared in 2017 from Buea? Where are those girls today? How about the female student who was raped before execution in Bambili some 2 weeks ago? Indeed, a leading female voice and journalist in Cameroon, Komin Musa, noted that the rape of women is one of the untold stories in the ongoing crisis. Dare I add that La République du Cameroon soldiers are exclusively responsible for it. It is in much the same way that France and La République du Cameroon have been raping the territory of Ambazonia that looks just like the petite silhouette of the 17-year-old teenage victim. If Joseph Betty Asumo, Cameroon's minister delegate at the presidency for defense, has been swift on hanging dry or film bitter the rapist, as stated in his statement on July 24th, La République du Cameroon and France can let go of Ambazonians to go and rebuild their country, starting with helping rape victims cope with the ignominy that has been visited upon them. Innocent Chair for Ambazonia Calling.
Here we go. Drum roll, please. And welcome to our Ntumfoyn of the Week segment. We don't do foolish, but when there are capital fools out there, we make it our duty to find them, and every week we crown one of them the Ntumfoyn of the Week. This week, the man who already won the Nyamfuka of the Decade, Franklin Jume, or whatever he is called, insisted on being in the running for something with all his ranting. After due consideration, Franklin Jume has this week joined Paul Atanganji as the only second inductee into the Nyamfuka Hall of Shame, rising from the rank of Nyamfuka of the Decade to that of Nyamfuka Forever. With Jume out of the way, here now is Veronique Vetimfe with the roll call of this week's top contenders for the crown of shame, the Nyamfuka of the Week.
In third position this week are two individuals who probably ought to pay Ambazonia Calling for free publicity. The first of the two is the mayor, who has never passed the GCE, yet frauded his way into the University of Buea. Fraudster and the visa-chasing Ekema of Buea Council, along with Paddy Asanga of Abakwa Boys Club, are the boot-licking and brain-dead CPDM stooges who this week tried to outperform each other in sabotaging Ambazonia's restoration quest. The first for his dull attempt to force shopkeepers to open their businesses on Ghost Town days, and the second for calling Ambazonia fighters to lay down their weapons. Ekema and Paddy Asanga are this week's co-winners of Miserable Loser of the Crown of Nyamfuka of the Week. In the position of runner-up is a collective made up of imams, the Imam of Bamenda, the Imam of Buea, and the moderator of the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon, who, along with His Eminence Christian Cardinal Tumi, this week made the mind-blowing mistake of thinking that Ambazonians are still begging for a conference. As if the two Anglophone conferences of 1993 and 1994 did not discuss all there is to discuss about separation from colonial Cameroon. The Imams of Buea and Bamenda, the moderator of the Presbyterian Church, and Christian Cardinal Tumi are this week runner-up for the Nyamfuka of the Week. Our winner this week is Dr. Simon Munzo, who should have known better, having been involved in the Ambazonia question for at least a quarter of a century. Even prior to this week, he had already earned the nickname of Munzo Iscariot. This week, he has become the only human being living to win the crown of Nyamfuka of the Week for the second time in the very short lifetime of this program. Once believed to be unapologetically in support of the restoration of independence of Ambazonia, this king of for before for back now claims he owes nothing to the Biya regime and expects no favors from them. This week, though, Dr. Munzo reportedly manipulated even Christian Cardinal Tumi into signing off and organizing a conference in Buea to debate matters that were resolved during the first and second AACs. By a mile, therefore, Dr. Simon Munzo is this week's winner of the crown of shame, the Nyamfuka of the Week. This is Veronique Vetimfe reporting for Ambazonia Calling.
Colonial Cameroon has tried harder every passing week to create hostility between Ambazonians of the northern and southern zones. The regime is getting more desperate by the day, including recruiting stark raving Graphi haters to run a campaign on social media. Journalist Ekine Agbo slammed the Southwest provincialists and Graphi haters in an opinion piece that I will render in studio here. It would have been enough to dismiss the rising crescendo of xenophobic attacks on Northwesterners by some self-elected Southwest elite on social media platforms as a shameful display of grass opportunism and a betrayal of Anglophone struggle for which the verdict of history would be merciless. By any streak of the imagination, the ranting of these overzealous, self-seeking, and misguided CPDM courtiers parading themselves as Southwest elite has degenerated into a comical spectacle of odium and hate speech directed at Northwesterners who are being vilified for championing the resistance against Bia's genocidal anti-Anglophone war. At the risk of overstating what is by now so obvious, this belated effort to rehash the insidious Northwest-Southwest divide is an aberration which fits the pattern of elite impunity in which self-seeking morons, scums, and sundry political jobbers are requisitioned by the Southwest CPDM regime barons to rave and rant against Northwesterners in the name of public engagement. Some have even threatened to create armed militias to tackle Northwesterners in the Southwest. The embarrassing spectacle of political scavengers stomping on social media and painting Northwesterners as the boogeyman of the current struggle is more than disgraceful, unconscionable, and confounding. This divisive clamor and inflammation of primordial sentiments by those self-appointed guardians of the Southwest estate who willfully and ignorantly lack the requisite temperament for civilized discourse is un-Ambazonian and unacceptable. All true-blood Southwesterners should feel a sense of outrage at this unbelievable shame that these slave children and their feet-column accomplices are contemptuously perpetrating in their name. Needless saying, they neither represent nor speak for the Southwest, their shameful and sycophantic gratification to the corridors of power notwithstanding. In point of fact, though, graffiti bashing is nothing new. Rather, it has become something of a political culture for Southwest CPDM elite. True Northwest-Southwest relations have had its challenges, which have been overplayed for propaganda purposes by selfish politicians and elites on both sides. These gangster kleptocrats are stuck in the past, and they think because they might have had an unsavory personal relation with one graffiti man, therefore all graffiti people are the same. But in the context of the current Ambazonia struggle, the unhelpful reasoning that Northwesterners resident in the Southwest are undermining the economic development of the Southwest is a claim of grass ineptitude that has no redeeming political value. The discord being sown by Southwest zealots suggests grass ignorance or outright mischief and betray a lack of political sophistication. Southwesterners are politically savvy to see through the hypocrisy of those fighting to maintain and expand their private economic and political estates on the back of our collective misery. The truth of the matter is that there is much that unites Northwesterners and Southwesterners than divides them. Nation building is not for simpletons or irredentists. The parochial irredentists who assault our sensibilities with bigotry and xenophobic attacks against Northwesterners are the real enemies of the Southwest and the Ambazonian nation. Una draws the show. Stay tuned. Ambazonia Calling will be right back with more news, analysis, commentary, opinion, and editorials. The calls have gone out again, loud and clear, for Ambazonian senators and parliamentarians elected or appointed by Colonial Bia to do justice to the cause for the restoration of the independence of Ambazonia by resigning en bloc and returning to Boya. Even mass resignations by appointed, decreed, and or badly elected senators or parliamentarians of Ambazonian extraction may not be sufficient to trigger the kind of constitutional crisis that made the 1953 walkout from the Eastern Nigerian House of Assembly in Enugu so effective and so historic, as Lambert Mbom now reports.
After the Declaration of Independence, restored on October 1st, 2017, MPs and senators of Southern Cameroon pulled a political stunt, announcing resignations only to return to the hand-clapping and praise-singing National Assembly, where their most important contribution has been staging protests on the floor of the House. Their forebears, who showed political class and a higher level of political maturity by resigning from the House in Enugu in 1953 and constituting the Benevolent Neutrality Bloc, must be turning in their graves to see how cowardly present-day MPs are. Thanks to their action, Southern Cameroons gained self-government in 1954, electing a government and making the case over the next 8 years for independence. Many have suggested that their example is worth emulating. They include the grandfather of the Ambazonian Revolution, His Royal Highness von Gorgi Dinka, who has argued the case for mass resignation, justifying overwhelming support for independence. It is said that even before the creation of the SDF in 1990, von Gorgi Dinka reportedly convinced MPs to step down. Those from the southern zone returned home only to find out that their colleagues of the northern zone did not quit, forcing the southern zoners to return to Yaoundé. One thing is clear: this strategy will always lack complete implementation, especially when some senators are appointed by the colonial president. Last week, an ultimatum for MPs to resign no later than July 21st, 2018, expired without action. In fact, Honorable Joseph Mbandam of the SDF, parliamentarian from Momo, instead announced that he had packed his bag and baggage for Yaoundé. The political value of resignations, were they to tumble in en masse, would be watered down by the perception that any action taken by senators and MPs would have been secured thanks to a gun being held to their heads. Mass resignation is not guaranteed to produce the political outcome wished for or anticipated. One confession worth making is that there is no magic wand for achieving restoration. Resignations by parliamentarians may add to the pressure, but they may not be a sufficient condition. Parliamentarians are probably between the rock and the hard place. If they resign, they could be hunted down and physically eliminated. Just speaking up from the floor of Parliament has had Honorable Joseph Wilbur going from one hideout to another just to stay alive. Failure to resign exposes MPs to the wrath of Ambazonian fighters. Under the current dispensation of government by decree with Biya as King Supreme, withdrawal from Ambazonia would most likely be framed as only 2 of 10 regions, a negligible block, the regime may argue. It will continue business as usual, totally unperturbed. The same way the crisis in Ambazonia has been treated as if non-existent, even as parliaments elsewhere around the world, the USA, UK, Germany, European Union, Australia, to name but these, have basically cried louder than the bereaved, as it were. The Colonial National Assembly is a sham, a public disgrace whose focus, to some extent, is to bless the policy of the dictator to assimilate Ambazonians or cause the proverbial 2 cubes of sugar to melt. Honorable Weber predicted this moment when La République, aided by people like Dr. Simon Munzu, would be begging for a federation. The long and short, though, is that Ambazonians have been clear that they do not want to have anything to do anymore with colonial Cameroon. Also clear is the fact that MPs represent only themselves, not Ambazonians, and definitely not their aspirations for an independent homeland. The lone most honorable thing to do to win back respect from their constituents would be for all senators and MPs of Ambazonian extraction to resign and join the struggle. If it does nothing else, it will send a very powerful message to the world. Such action, as with resignation from Nigeria, will become part of the building block, the stone rejected by naysayers that will ultimately become the cornerstone of Ambazonia's independence. Lambert Mbom for Ambazonia Calling.
Welcome to our special interview segment, The Devil Unmasked, The Truth Out.
Understandably, when you look at Dr. Munzu's letter which he wrote to Biya on the 11th of July, begging for this conference, you know that he has actually roped these clerics into a kind of dirty situation. He had tried to rope the politicians the Anglophone politicians in his Anglophone dialogue forum. He met Frundi and many others, and then he discovered that it wasn't just going.
But are you suggesting that the life of Christian Cardinal Tumi may be in danger?
Of course, definitely. He had already attempted it. So he and any other person involved in this thing should be very careful. In fact, we don't even need to talk more about it because it is a ploy. It's one of the ways in which they will rope him into trouble and then slaughter him. So and then go and leave, I am in the water.
Are you also suggesting he may have had a gun to his head when he did this? Is there other pressure coming from, I don't know, the Grandmaster visiting?
No, we understand very well that those are people who are of evil descent, and consequently they are capable of just anything.
Let me take you to another topic here. The legal and diplomatic justification of the restoration of the state of Ambazonia and demands for its recognition. Could you spend a bit of time with me on laying out what that justification is, so people who don't know it, don't remember it, have not learned about it, can go back and reference what you can lay out here?
That is right. You know, the question has been raised whether wars of national liberation could in any way be covered by the Geneva Conventions of 1949 specifically. You know, Article 1 it concerns wars of national liberation, armed conflicts in which people are fighting against colonial domination and alien occupation and against racist regimes in the exercise of their right to self-determination. So in our case, it has already been made clear by the Banjul court that we are fighting our case of self-determination. We have been declared by the court as a people who have a right to self-determination. Both Article 1 and Article 51 of the United Nations Charter refer to the principle of self-determination. That is, during the period of colonialism in the 20th century, the international community gave much theoretical support to those involved in struggles for national liberation. This support took the guise of multifarious resolutions adopted by the United Nations and other international and regional organizations. Many of these messages of support were founded on the United Nations Declaration on the granting of independence to colonial countries and peoples. Domination and exploitation constitutes a denial of fundamental human rights. It is contrary to the Charter of the United Nations and is an impediment to the promotion of world peace and cooperation. So here you see it clearly that what Biya and his gangsters are doing, they have been subjugating the people of the southern Cameroons and making sure that they do not only dominate, they exploit, and now they are denying them of their the exercise of their peaceful and free right to complete independence and the integrity of their national territory. So here the people have a right to fight to restore their independence and their sovereignty.
You are talking about the right to fight, as in the right to wage war with the effect of chasing out colonizers. That's what you're talking about.
Exactly, that is what it is. Even when you look at more of this, example of such support that legally is a resolution adopted in 1964 by the Conference of Jurists of Afro-Asian Countries in Conakry, that is Guinea, which states that all struggles undertaken by the peoples for the national independence or for the restitution of the territories of occupied parts thereof, including armed struggle, are entirely legal. And then I will add, resort to arms by colonized peoples was also recognized by the Conference of Non-Aligned States in 1964 in Cairo. It was stated here that the process of liberation is irresistible and irreversible. Colonized people may legitimately resort to arms to secure the full exercise of their right to self-determination and independence if colonial powers persist in opposing their natural aspirations. So there is absolutely nothing legally wrong with the Southern Cameroonians or Ambazonians making sure that they use armed struggle to make sure that they recoup what belongs to them. That is their homeland. They can do everything to push this under the carpet. They are wasting their time.
I'd like to thank you here, Prof, because this is a topic we should come back to, but very, very educative segment here that we've had with you, and thank you again. Thank you, and have a wonderful, wonderful week.
Same to you and our listeners.
And we've got to run here, to a really long time short. We have colleagues in the studio whose papers we're not going to be able to use. We got Wanaku, the monk from Balikumato, Vezekov himself. We're not going to be able to run your paper this week, bro. And Tanyi Jutos again as well. And Barrister Manjong Jutambe, we're not going to be able to run your paper. Just out of time here. One more before we get to the letter to Joshua. Here is our own Barrister Siambe with the isolation of the Biya regime around the world.
The denial of entry visas to the United States that has recently been suffered by certain officials and collaborators of the colonialists in Yaoundé has gladdened many an Ambazonian who saw the denial as a clear signal by Washington to Yaoundé. Cases in point include the denial of a visa to infamous Mr. Ikama Patrick Esunge, Lord Mayor of Boya Council, as well as mass denials affecting all members of La République du Cameroon's military team to the recent Women's World Cup in Texas. Visa denials or rejection of visa renewals have also hit the spouses of the regime's military officers. Ambazonia Calling believes that these visa denials are most likely test cases for the full wrath of United States legislation known as the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act. Enacted in 2016, the Global Magnitsky Act, as it is called, authorizes the President of the United States to impose sanctions such as the blockage or revocation of entry visas into the United States, the freezing of funds and seizure of assets of certain foreign persons, both individuals and entities. The Act is applicable to persons that are responsible for or have acted as agents of others responsible for extrajudicial killings, torture, or other gross violations of internationally recognized human rights. It also applies to government officials or senior associates of government officials complicit in acts of significant corruption. The Act promotes respect for human rights at all levels of government by enabling the United States to apply targeted sanctions on any individual involved in human rights violations, from senior officials to low-level officers and even non-governmental associates and affiliates. It allows the Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor, in consultation with other State Department officials, to submit recommendations for people to be sanctioned to the Secretary of State. Various congressional committees also submit names and recommendations to the President of the United States. As recent as April 2017, the Trump administration not only affirmed its full support for the Magnitsky Act, but also revealed that it was in the process of identifying people and entities to whom the Act should be applied and was actively collecting necessary evidence in that regard. Other countries, including notably the United Kingdom, recently passed similar versions of the Global Magnitsky Act. The Canadian Parliament and European Parliament are both considering bills to target international human rights violators in a similar manner. What does all of this mean for Ambazonians? Not a damn thing if they don't act on it. Ambazonians need to do all that is necessary and legally permissible to take full advantage of this legislation designed and intended to ensure that perpetrators in greedy, evil, murderous, genocidal regimes like La République du Cameroon do not get away with their atrocities. Ambazonians must embark on collecting and keeping comprehensive, accurate records of the egregious human rights violations and genocidal activities of the Biya regime, its agents, affiliates, and facilitators, their thievery and financial transactions, their bank accounts, and all of their stolen wealth. The files on these murderous gangsters, their family members, and business associates must be robust, complete, and ready for submission to the concerned United States entities for purposes of application of the Magnitsky Act. Ambazonians must also intensify lobbying efforts such that the files get into the hands of pertinent congressional committees for investigation and subsequent application of law. Truth be told, if Ambazonians do their homework correctly, it is more likely than not that each time these raiders of national coffers, perpetrators of atrocity crimes and genocide, attempt to hop into the United States or any other country with similar legislation in place, the doors will be solidly slammed in their faces and their ill-gotten wealth and assets put in the freezer. See Ajimvo Ambe for Ambazonia Calling.
Here is our letter to Joshua.
Dear Joshua, have you heard of the young girl who was raped Monday in Bamenda? Yes, I mean the one raped by your countryman, that flat-foot Mbida. I hear that your regime is acting scandalized by this incident of rape. Are you birds of the same feather, Joshua? Your forces of insecurity and disorder have learned from the master himself, who could not resist laying with a mistress the age of his own daughter. Now your minister delegate in charge of defense wants the world to believe that the delinquent soldier, what am I saying? You want the world to believe that the rapist soldier has been sanctioned. Try to fool someone else, please. Our people know better. We know your soldiers. We know your regime of rapists. This is what you do for a living. You have raped Ambazonians now for 57 years. And even after being caught with your pants down, you are pretending that it is all about one and indivisible couple. The only mistake you want to own up to is executing priests by mistake, Joshua. Reverend Father Alexander Saab was assassinated last week in Muyuka by a stray bullet. Your regime told the world that. This week, it told the world that Reverend Father Juta was injured by another stray bullet in Jinicom. The only thing that should be a surprise for anyone who knows your evil regime well is the fact that you did not claim that the 17-year-old girl was raped by a stray penis. I have news for you and your regime, Joshua. You are never going to get away with pretending that you have already sanctioned your barbarians for the systematic use of rape as a weapon of war in Ambazonia. All of you criminals deployed across Ambazonia are not only spraying bullets, they're also spraying sexually transmitted diseases, including the big H. You will only be bothered by rape should the animals you call soldiers rape your own daughter, I mean Brenda Bia. Or perhaps when they rape your own Oga Madam, the queen whose hair has to be done at the same salon as the hair of the Nko, that juju from my native com. Verily, I tell you, Joshua, a regime is coming. You will be chased from power sooner than you think. It is a promise. Someone is getting ready to do to you what Burkinabés did to Blaise Compaoré. And I know that many would like you to get some VIP service, like the kind that was delivered to Samuel Doe in the streets of Monrovia, with their forecom, all treated with special care. It is clear that you are more aware of the coming of your end days in power, Joshua. That is why your inner circle at the Rosicrucian Order, your acquaintances in the inner circles of the Grand Master of the Order of Malta, even those who worship with the witches of Mvomoka and the gods of Esingan, know that you need fortification in human blood and life. When shall you have enough, Joshua? When shall you have enough deaths, enough blood, enough rape? Oh, I was forgetting that you are getting cheered on by France and by the fake human rights organizations that your friends call Human Rights Watch. We saw Human Rights Watch staff struggling to earn the bribe dough your regime probably offered. Joshua, you're too much, oh. When you have offered golden statues to everybody and their grandmother, when you have the Commonwealth and the United Nations scribes in your hip pocket, when you have bought up and paid for every human rights report that is not yet written, when you have put the chairperson of the African Union in your pocket, why would you need a presidential election? Don't misunderstand me, Joshua. You no longer can 419 anyone. Not even citizens of La République are getting fooled anymore. except the 27 other Dunda heads who claim to be running against you for the presidency. After 36 years of misrule, citizens of neighboring Cameroon, they know that you are a political fayman, a war criminal waiting for your version of the Nuremberg trials, and a master trickster in voodoo democracy. Now you get lost. From our studios here in Washington, D.C., our producer is Jeff McCoy. Our music today is from Ken Wanaku, the monk from Balikumato, William Ford, an ambassador of blessed memory, Eric Matisse on the web at soundimage.org, and Prince Ajwa Alemanji of Ajam Sonic Kitron, USA. Ambazonia Calling is a joint production of Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. You can find us on the web at www.themissionstribune.com, www.compassfreepress.com, and www.africafreedomnetwork.com. Next Sunday is another day. Until then, keep the spirit, keep the faith, keep up the fight for justice and independence for Ambazonia. Stay Amba strong.